Good evening, everyone. It's Charlotte on a Thursday evening here in Wiltshire. Just wanted to give you a bit of an update, really, on what's been going on this week. Obviously, I've got the YouTube channel. I have a Flickr account, which is under Bella Beaumont rather than Charlotte Hemingway. Just reasons for that, but I won't bore you with the details. It's been a difficult week. I had last Sunday, my wife told me that my daughter, her boyfriend of 6 months, which doesn't sound a long time, had finished with her, and she was quite devastated. It's probably her first real boyfriend, so I suppose first love, new love, it can be really painful, and I can obviously sympathise with that as well myself. So I wrote to my daughter on Monday, bearing in mind I haven't seen her for nearly 3 years, same as my sons, who I haven't seen for nearly 3 years. Just telling her that I loved her, I always love her. Same as probably most parents, they would give their lives for their children. I think it's that act of parenthood and love that we have for our children. And I've mentioned that I've been made aware by my wife that her relationship had ended, and I was really sorry, and she wanted to meet up at some stage. I would obviously like to meet with her and just talk with her generally, not necessarily really about that. Well, I then got a colleague dropped the letter in through the door on Monday, and then I got a rant from my wife on Tuesday to say that it was confidential and I shouldn't have mentioned it, and it had caused absolute uproar in the house, and my daughter had tore into my wife. So that started a pretty abysmal morning, to be honest with you, on Tuesday morning. So I decided not to go into work and work from home. One of my colleagues, Natalie, came over here for probably about 2 or 3 hours, and we talked and talked, and which was nice. I think it was actually Wednesday that this happened, not Tuesday. So it was all very difficult. Well, on Tuesday I went to see one of my colleagues, employees, who's very dear to me. She's the only other Christian in the business besides me. She struggles, I think, with the whole concept of being transgender and being Christian as well. And it's the same old thing as I've mentioned before, is it an oxymoron? And of course, it isn't an oxymoron. You can be transgender and you can be a professing Christian as well. And she's never seen, as far as I know, a picture of Charlotte ever. And I suppose in a way that I protected her from that, cautious that I didn't want to upset her or put her in a difficult situation. But on Tuesday morning, sitting on her sofa, I walked over and said, "This is me." And it was a photo from Saturday. I went out with a solicitor friend for lunch in Corsham, and had a great time, incredibly nervous, and the truth was it's the first time I've ever been out with anyone, bar myself, and that really has just been shopping at Asda in Frome. So it was a whole new thing, and I was really, really scared actually. And she said, "You're shaking," and I knew I was. It was hard. We went to one garden centre. I was late an hour. We went to one garden centre, and it was packed, and they said there wasn't much chance of getting a meal. She'd been out the night before on a company do and was feeling a bit jaded, too many shots on the night before. So, but we had a great time. We went to Corsham instead, and into a coffee house there, can't remember what it was called, and it was absolutely fine. It was enlightening, it was reassuring, it was confirming. And I don't know about other trans women or trans men, but it was busy and there were people coming in and people going out, and we were sitting right by the door. We're just back from the door, so we were the nearest table. And I think in a way I purposely tried to make eye contact with people, really I suppose just to explore whether they knew I was trans or not. The waitress came backwards and forwards a number of times, and she never said anything and didn't really intimate anything either. So we had lunch, we laughed and talked, and then we left and I took her back home, and then came home. So the photo on Tuesday was from that day, although I took it here at home when I got back. I wish I'd taken one there, it would have been memorable. But it's sort of opened up my confidence a lot, I think, in going out and not being so frightened, scared, as probably the majority of trans women are. And I read on Flickr some of your photos, and there's some that go out and, like me, it's the fear of man and the fear of women. And the trouble is that I think the fear of it is worse than the deed. We worry about what could happen, what might happen, and yet probably the reality of it is that it doesn't happen. And some trans women, trans men are obviously far more confident and convincing, if that's the right word, and they're comfortable in a public environment. And you go onto YouTube and there's many of them that you see sitting in coffee shops and having meals and things. And I hope one day that I will get there, and I know I will. So that was interesting, but it's been a really difficult week. The Christian friend who I showed the photo to, we had an emotional morning on the Tuesday. We talked and talked and talked, and I tried to really educate her on what it is about being transgender. And it's hard, I think. All my friends not in the church, who I've come to know probably more so in the last 3 years, and my colleagues at work are all totally accepting and quite happy to go out with me, as we're doing tomorrow night, into Bristol. And they're really, really accepting and supportive and helpful, and that is a huge help. And I think all of us in terms of trans really do need the support of people who love us. And I've said before that it's I find it hard to understand why people love me, when the truth is I've never really loved myself. And I think it probably is the trans issue that's been a problem all of those years, battling it, the shame, the insecurity, the fear, all of those things just build up to a bit of a crescendo and cause us to just fear everything, even just being who we are, even within sometimes the own confines of our own homes as well. And that can be a challenge as well. But so is my Christian colleague wrote on Tuesday afternoon, she found out that I was planning to go to Bristol to the Dream Boys with my colleagues, and she was not happy, and it was a real slating. I've got to be honest, it was incredibly difficult. It's really harsh. And Natalie, my colleague, when I copied her into it, she went, the only word was ouch, with exclamation marks, which really summed up the whole thing. My solicitor friend, who's just been ringing me, actually trying to ring me while I'm talking now, was pretty angry about it, really. And I said, but because someone judges us, it doesn't mean that we should judge them, and two wrongs don't make a right. And I think it's right for us to always show love, even when we're not loved, and maybe to some people who in a way don't deserve to be loved. but that's what it's all about, and I hope that love will conquer all. So that's that. Now, I don't know if you can see my sweatshirt, but the lady Emma, who I went for coffee with 2 weeks ago, she had a green one of these on when she came into the office to see me. And it says, a little less judgment, a little more kindness. And I think for the trans community, and probably for the gay and lesbians as well, it really does apply to all of us, because, we don't want to be judged. Why should we? Why should we have to almost convince people that we're trans, as though we need their affirmation and their confirmation about what we are, and for many of us like me have always been. But it's the way of the world. But I would say, as I've said too many times before, the church is hard to come to terms with, even as a professing Christian, because so many people in church, I would say, and this is probably a bit of a bold statement, probably 95% of the church would not agree with being transgender and being a Christian as well. Some may tolerate it, but the problem they have is that, you can have the label of being trans, but what they won't accept is what comes with that. This, me, here, now, like this. They won't accept that this is what being trans is about, and they would word it as sin. They would class this, me now, as sinning. And when I showed the photo to my colleague, the one from Saturday, she was unfazed, and she said, well, what do you expect me to do? Do you expect me to be elated, or just to tell you it's a sin? And I said that, God didn't just make black and white, he made grey as well. And I don't know whether to say that trans is grey. Maybe it is. The church sees male and female, and that's it. There is nothing outside of it. That's the black, that's the white. And for me, being trans is grey. And, if we're created, all of us, in the image of God, if we truly believe that, then God's made us the way he has for the reason he has. And, as I've said so many times before, that we didn't choose to be trans. The gay people didn't choose to be gay. Lesbians didn't choose to be lesbians. No more that someone who has Asperger's or autism or Down syndrome chose to have those issues. On Sunday last, I always listen to a sermon on a Sunday morning. I used to attend church, but now I don't. Just too much of a struggle. The anxiety, the fear of people, the questions, all of it is incredibly difficult to deal with. So I decided that there's a website for sermons called Sermon Audio, which has got thousands and thousands of sermons from all over the world. And I decided to look up any sermons about being transgender. And the first thing that came up actually was a radio interview. I'm assuming it was on a Christian radio station, between a man Christian and a woman doctor who clearly was professing Christian. And she would have purported herself to be probably an authority on trans issues and gay and lesbian, and yet the ignorance and stupidity of what she was saying was just ridiculous. She compared, she said, people aren't born trans. We just choose to be trans at some stage in our lives, intimating that quite clearly it's a choice. that we can make, either to be or not to be, and as though it's within our power to not be. And, as I've said so many times, I'm over 60. I've known since I was 5, 6 that there was something different about me, and it was this not feeling that I was a boy, that I should have been a girl, but I was in a boy's body. And in those days, as I've said before, homosexuality at that time was an imprisonable offence. It was illegal. And gays, and I'm assuming lesbians, got locked up in prison as well. So they were really, really different times. But, the ignorance of this doctor was just absolutely mind-blowing, because, she was comparing it to, she said, people are no more trans being born than someone who has anorexia. And I just thought, what a ridiculous comparison, what ignorance, what ridicule, what an insult, to the trans community. And then I finished watching it. I think I just switched it off at some point, and then stupidly decided to try and find a sermon on transgender, which I did. It was an American minister. And to be honest with you, it was fire and brimstone. And the hatred, I would say, of the trans community. And he was talking very much about the trans agenda, as though, the trans community is wanting to take over the world and convert every child, and convince them that they're transgender. I mean, how ridiculous. I mean, what madness and bigotry and hypocrisy was it? And before I turned it off, he was literally ranting and raving, shouting with anger. And I just thought, where is the love of the church? Where is this acceptance of all? I was quoting today, I'll tell you about that in a minute, but I quoted someone today, and I quoted to my Christian friend on Tuesday, the verse in the New Testament, or the piece, the section in the New Testament that speaks about Christ is sitting somewhere, presumably in a village, in a desert place, and he's sitting on the ground, quite clearly from what it says. And the Jews brought to him a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. And they said, our law says that she should be stoned. And they wanted to test him to see what his response would be. And he didn't answer. He just sat drawing with his finger in the sand. And I think they said something again. And his answer was, let him that is without sin cast the first stone, which was profound, incredibly accurate, and incredibly right. And it specifies that they all left from the oldest and to the youngest until there was just Christ and the adulterous woman standing before him. And he asked, where have all thine accusers gone? And she said, they've left, Lord. And he said, so shall you, your sins are forgiven, sin no more. Now, why I say that is because committing adultery is a willing act that someone decides to do, probably premeditated, and it is lust, it's sex, and clearly she was caught in the act of adultery, which is, even according outside the church, really is not a good thing. It's quite heinous. But to really label the trans community in the same light as the Jews did with this woman is wrong, because being transgender is not a sin. No one can convince me, or I would say the majority of trans people, that it's a sin being transgender. But the problem they have is this, as I am now, female, dressed, going out for a coffee, as Charlotte, and so on. But they don't get it. And the problem is they won't get it because they don't want to get it. And the problem with their not getting it is, I believe, is that they fear that if they were to accept me in a church like this and other trans, whether trans men or trans women, that they would be putting their own faith into question. And I suppose there's an element that probably don't think that, but feel compelled to think that and to say it because they feel it's the right thing to do. And this is where the church really needs to wake up. I'm in the process of writing a guide, I suppose, book, whatever you want to call it, to being transgender and being a professing Christian. Is it an oxymoron? So I'm working on that bit by bit, and I hope to keep adding to it, probably day by day. So today I went to Yeovil to see Louise. Louise doesn't own, but she runs this, which is called Natural Beauty. And she does electrolysis, she does massage, hot stone treatment, she does brows and other things as well. And she's absolutely lovely, hugely accepting and tolerant of the trans community. And she goes out with cross-dressers, shopping, walking, wherever that might be. So she's hugely supportive. So if you're looking for a trans friendly, or if you're a cross-dresser, if you're looking for someone who's willing to wax or do electrolysis or brows or whatever, even a massage, she is exceptional and a really, really nice lady. She's got a fantastic personality and she will make you feel instantly at ease, as she's done for me. So today I have my third session of electrolysis. The last two I've managed 50 minutes. Today I forgot to take paracetamol and ibuprofen before I went, so I think my 50 minutes was quite an achievement. I tend to talk probably the whole thing, and then I had planned to have a massage with hot stones after, which I did. It was absolutely brilliant. So highly recommend that as well if you're looking for something really to distress. So after the pain of electrolysis, the massage was a welcome therapy. So that was good. I guess that most people tend to have Netflix these days. It tends to be fairly standard. I'm sure there's probably a number that haven't. But I don't always... I tend to watch series a bit like Chicago Fire, which I'm absolutely glued with at the moment. And I've been watching it middle of the night when I can't sleep, and occasionally even first thing in the morning if I'm awake early. But there's on Netflix, there's an LGBT channel, and I thought, well, I'll have a look and see what's on there. And there was a documentary about the trans community in Hollywood. It's called Disclosure, and I would really highly recommend watching it. It's brilliant. I think it's been really, really well done, and I think it is a really accurate portrayal of the trans community in general, not just in Hollywood. And they interview consistently numbers of trans men and trans women throughout. They show clips of films about the way that the trans community is ridiculed. But I would really, really highly encourage watching it, because whether you're trans or not trans, or whether you're just interested, I think you'll find it incredibly informative. Now, there was one thing I read, I think, I can't remember now. No, maybe it was in Disclosure, actually, thinking about it. But I just wanted to voice this because I think it was quite profound. It really, really struck me. But it applied to America. And the person said that a survey, 80% of American people had never met someone who was transgender, whether trans man or trans woman. Well, it really hit me. It really struck me, because the problem is with that, I suppose you've got to question what the 20% thought about the trans community, but one would hope that maybe they were supportive, accepting, tolerant to some degree, but obviously there'd be an element that wouldn't be. So what it really means is that, and I think they say this in disclosure, that 80%, their formative information about the trans community is purely from the media. It's from film, it's from, I don't know, newspapers, magazines, whatever it might be. So their information will always come from that element if they don't know someone that's trans. So I think that that was quite a revelation for me, and it concerned me because I would say probably the majority of the media is not pro-trans. I would say it was either neutral or probably in many cases anti. So, I think if you are trans, and you've got the confidence to come out to friends, colleagues, whatever the case may be, you really have to, as I've said before, you have to be really, really discerning about who you share this with, because there is the fear that someone may weaponize it against you and publicly ridicule you. So I think that you really have to trust those people. And when I came away from my colleagues on Tuesday, I was the Christian friend. I was pretty upset, actually. It was really, really pretty tough. And as I drove around the corner, I bumped into her next door neighbour, who I know really well, who is a really lovely, lovely person. She works at a private hospital in Bath. And, I have a huge love for all of the family. And I wound the window down of the car and she said, she's obviously see I was upset. She said, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "I've just had a difficult, emotional time with the next door neighbour. I won't say her name." And she said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And she said, "Anything in particular?" I said, "Well, actually, I'm going to message you later and tell you what it's about, what's going on." Well, I didn't do it that evening, but I sent her a message just saying, always valued her as a friend and, trust her implicitly as a person. And I wanted to trust this information with her. And I didn't say about being trans, but what I did is I gave her the link to my YouTube video, which is titled "The Challenges of Being Transgender." Well, she got it the next day. She was working. She messaged me and said, "I've watched a bit, and I think you're incredibly brave in coming out and opening up to me and maybe to others about your situation." She watched it when she got home and then she messaged me later, and it was so hugely loving and supportive. And, offered, wanted me to come round for coffee at some stage and a chat and whatever. And I think this is the thing, and I would say that the majority of these people that I've come out to are ex-clients of my business who I've known for many years, who I'm incredibly fond of, and we have really good long-standing relationships, and I would say, really friendly relationships. So, but, there are people, I've got to be honest, who I'm really, really close to, who I probably will not come out to. And I get close to it at times. I think, I'd say to them, one day I will tell you, but I'm not sure whether I will. And I would say probably the majority are men that I struggle to come out with. I've come out to a number, but I would say the majority are women who I've come out to. So anything else? No, not really. I think that's probably about it. Just want to say, actually, I've had a lot of comments from people which are hugely supportive and some people are really struggling with being transgender. And I had a message from someone who was about 75, I think, who was transgender, trans woman, and clearly had been or was in the same situation I've been in previously in terms of suicidal. And I could really feel the pain of this message, and it really concerned me because obviously there's very little I can do in terms of support besides being supportive and hoping that from some of my videos it may give help, advice, encouragement in actually pushing ahead with their transition if that's what they choose to do as I'm doing. So for all those who've sent me comments, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. It helps me. It helps my anxiety. It helps me socially, mentally, being able to cope. It's a coping mechanism in many ways. I've had the odd one, who misconstrues being cross-dressing with being transgender. But I'd say that's probably a lack of knowledge. I don't like using the word ignorance because it's not a very pleasant word, but I think it's a lack of knowledge, a lack of information, and a lack of understanding. But cross-dressing and being transgender are incredibly different. And if you are confused about what the difference is, I would suggest you go on the web and do a search around and scout, and there's a huge amount of information on there between the differences of being transgender and just cross-dressing, and I'm not belittling it at all. So anyway, I'm off out tomorrow evening, Dream Boys. Two of my colleagues have got very ill children with all sorts of horrible bugs at the moment. One is definitely coming, but the other one, who is a very, very close friend, colleague, is questioning whether she will be able to come, which would be a real blow because she's an absolute hoot and will really make the evening. So I'll let you know how that goes, but there we go. So I'm just going to switch my thingy on. So that's about it. Thank you to all my friends, my supportive friends who watch this, who have been saying you've not done a video for a while. We want to see one. So here you go. Here it is. Enjoy. Well, hopefully you enjoy it anyway with me babbling on as ever I do. So again, as I always say, COVID is still out there. Take care. Be sensible. Be wise. I still wear a mask wherever I go shopping, anywhere where there's a public element. I always do. I always do the gel at the end of it just to make sure, and then when I get home I always give my hands a good wash as well. So I think let's all be careful out there. If you want to message me about anything you are concerned about, anything where you might be looking for advice, support, if you're feeling suicidal, message me. I look at my messages consistently throughout the day and evening, and sometimes in the middle of the night. And I will respond where needed. So take care, love you all, and keep safe.